She's an advocate for a strong public education system and laws that make sense. And she's also a candidate for the Charleston County School Board's East Cooper seat. I speak exclusively with Shad Johnson for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio. Shad Johnson, it's so good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Yeah. And as a lot of people know, that you are obviously an advocate for a strong public education system and laws that make sense. And you're also the 2018 candidate for the Charleston County School Board for the East Cooper seat.
That's right.
Can I go to the East Cooper seat right now?
Yes.
What is that like for you, Shad Johnson?
Running for that position?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I ran for the same position 4 years ago. So it's, I've learned some things from then, I've got a lot more knowledge, a lot more experience. So it's a little bit different race. Last time it was 3 candidates running for 2 seats. This time it's 4 candidates running for 2 seats.
Right.
So it's a little bit different, a little bit different there. And, but it's been, I enjoyed running last time and getting to know all the candidates. I think there were, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think there were 7 candidates last time. There are 11 candidates this time. So one, it makes the forums, sometimes we only get to answer, maybe 3 or 4 questions. But it's interesting to hear everyone's response, and I've enjoyed getting to know what some of the candidates, of course, I already knew.
Right.
But I've enjoyed that. It's a little bit different. When I ran, there were some special interest groups. There's some robocalls that went out before anyone was even officially a candidate. You didn't know who made them, things like that. This time, I have some unknown person has copied my education Facebook group. I have an education group with 4,000 members for 7 years. It's a respected, well-established group, and someone copied it. And it's like the same name, but with one word changed. And they have put all these radical posts on it, and then they'll share one of my posts. So it looks like it's my page. So things like that, not to mention the big billboards
Right.
and the commercials,
Right.
radio commercials, TV commercials.
Right.
Voters are being bombarded by special interest groups where you don't know what the agenda is. So we do have secret agendas. And I'm just a grassroots candidate, and I was 4 years ago, and I am now.
Okay.
So I haven't even raised even $3,000. I just try to word of mouth. I've got my reputation, and I'm on the District 2 constituent board. I just have to do the best I can. But while I've enjoyed the forums and getting to know candidates, it's very frustrating to face sort of unknown secret agendas.
And you talk about those forums. I know I believe earlier this week, Matthew Carrington basically tweeted this out. He says this: all candidates for the Charleston County School Board support higher teacher pay, smaller class sizes, more teacher planning time, and an end of cap on pay increases. He says we need to hold them accountable and make sure they deliver. If you were to be elected, can you deliver?
Yeah, I was happy to hear that everyone agreed on that. And like, for example, the smaller class size is something my education group has advocated for since day one, 7 years ago when we started, because we know that's a proven reform. So, my big picture idea is to shift the focus from 75 Calhoun to the classroom and use proven reforms. Talk to our teachers and principals who are working with the students, and instead of spending money maybe on unnecessary things. I can give you an example. We have the image, the consultants
Right.
for the district's image. We have people hired to go around to all the high schools and middle schools to search our students, for drug searches. Our schools can handle that ourselves. The bulletproof doors. They're just. I think there are people working on school climate down at the district office. That's something the school should determine. So there are a lot of things we can shift to the classroom, more money, and just the focus, not just money, but the focus, so that we're doing things like what you mentioned, the smaller class size, supporting students by supporting teachers and principals and giving them the flexibility to address the needs of their students. So I think that's a big picture idea that focus needs to shift to those. So yeah, I do believe I can deliver on all those things by shifting focus and resources to the actual classroom.
And you talk about the classroom. When you go around talking to the teachers, what are they telling you that they actually need now?
Well, first of all, teacher morale, I think, is at all-time low, from my experience, as long as I've been involved in education here in Charleston. So that's the first thing I see, is the drawn faces, the private messages on Facebook because they don't feel like they can say anything, ask for what they need. But the other thing I hear is discipline. The discipline plan is not effective right now. It needs to be tweaked, and the school district is working on tweaking that. But right now it's so rigid that the teachers are often sending students, very disruptive students, out of the class, and they're coming right back. And it's not, and a discipline plan is not all about punishing students. I mean, it's about helping them. I mean, of course, you don't want the class disruptive or, illegal activity at schools, but also we want to help those students. So I hear, discipline's a problem, and just teachers feel like they don't have a voice. They're frustrated that there's not enough reading interventionists. Some of them only have like a part-time reading interventionist, and so their students are on waiting lists to get help, to get the extra help. And then also, class size, of course. There are too many children in the class to be able to manage, the discipline and to help. Each child's different. So it's kind of there are a lot of issues that they're experiencing, and what it all comes down to is if the teachers if we listen to their voice and they have the flexibility to say, this is what we need, this is what, whether it's, some students mental health services, and that gets tricky on how to recommend that, but I feel like teachers feel like they don't have a voice and they don't feel safe to speak out and say, I really need this needs to change.
How did we get here?
How did we?
Yes, ma'am.
For the last 3 administrations, I've seen the same kind of thing, and it does seem worse now. But the school district is managed from the top down instead of from the bottom up. And the bottom up is you look at the classroom, you have the needs, the teachers tell us they're the ones there working with the students, principals, and then the school district is in the role of support. For the last 3 administrations, I've seen that's not the case. The school district is more micromanaging, kind of giving one size fits all. Everything comes from downtown, looking at a piece of paper, looking at a test score, and making a decision that way instead of looking at the school, looking at the classroom and asking, what do you need? What supports do you need in place? So I've seen that, and that kind of coincides with No Child Left Behind, which focuses more on test scores. And so I think everything is so, data-driven that we're not really meeting children where they are, and by listening to those who are working with the students. So you would think with No Child Left Behind being replaced, and there's less testing, less focus on that we would improve. But our school district, I just see more and more top heavy, and so I feel like we really keep going further in the wrong direction.
If you were to be elected to the school board, that is, what direction would you take the school board as far as East Cooper?
Well, as far as East Cooper, and just so and I know you know this, I would be the point person, one of 2 point people for East Cooper. But I'm elected at large and serve at large, so I would be, I was down at Edisto Island looking at Jane Edwards, and they're afraid that school's going to be closed. So that's a rural school that has the same problem what I'm about to tell you about in the East Cooper area. But so I will be the point person for East Cooper. And I've already, I'm the chair of the constituent board over there. That doesn't include St. James Santee.
Right.
But if I'm the East Cooper county board member, it would. And fortunately, my board has worked with the District 1 constituent board together to make sure that Lincoln High School was closed and voters voted for it to be replaced. And so the 2 constituent boards were assigned with the duty of working on plans for the new high school, because the idea is that students from Mount Pleasant would also go to that school, so there were enough students. So for 2 years, I've already been working on pushing for that second high school and also a middle school to be built, and we don't even have land purchased. So it's that community And Allendale-McClellanville is feeling once again left behind. Where's the school? And so, so I've already been working on it for 2 years as a county board member. I will be in a better position to move the ball. Let's get the property. Let's start planning the school for these children, because and that's a problem with rural schools, whether it's Edisto or out in McClellanville and Allendale. Those students deserve to have a school, a neighborhood school. So that's one thing, and then everything else. With the Mount Pleasant schools and Sullivan's Island, it's they're going great. We're building Lucy Beckham High School, so I've already been very involved with a lot of decisions there, including rezoning.
Right.
So it's, I would continue to make sure that a lot of things already set. We know how big it is, but that'll be a big project because it's huge. A second high school, period, in that area is a very new thing.
Sure.
So I'd be able to do that, but and a lot of people, I'm sure you hear Mount Pleasant schools, they have everything, they get everything. We have overcrowded schools. The class size is big. We have at Wyandotte High School more than 800 students living in poverty. That's just often kind of overlooked because that number is diluted with the 4,000 students there.
Mm-hmm.
And since there's not that certain percentage, Title I funds don't go to help those students. So, I'll be a good advocate for what is needed in East Cooper too, even though we know a lot of the county says East Cooper schools, they do very well and they have enough, but we still have a lot of students that need help in our area too.
When you talk about those students, how are the students doing now with the ones that actually had to leave the Lincoln High School after they were closed?
We haven't had a report recently, and that's one issue is communication. I feel like can be a lot better between the school district to the county board members and to the constituent board members. But the last report I heard, they were experiencing problems academically because they when they were at Lincoln, it's my understanding that no one failed and that that it was a little bit, the bar wasn't as high.
Okay.
And that is a disservice to those students. So they came to Wando, so they did have a harder time. One, it's an adjustment.
Right.
It's Wando, it's
Right.
huge.
Right.
But also academically, they had, the bar was higher. And so there have been struggles and there have been, some discipline problems. But Wando, I believe, was very, welcoming, and there were a lot of things in place. There was one assistant principal that was assigned to those students, working with those students, just making sure that they get everything they can. So, it is, a process, but I think, hopefully they're doing better. But yeah, that reminds me, I'll ask for an update
Okay.
to see those numbers and see how they're doing.
Okay. And you talked about St. James Santee, obviously Allendale, McClellanville. Let me take you to endorsements. Obviously, Allendale Mayor Miriam Green endorsed you,
That's
as
right.
well as Mount Pleasant Mayor Will Haney. When you heard about those endorsements, what went through your mind?
Well, there were two things. One, I was just thrilled because that shows that they think I'm an authentic leader, and because it's not like they just out of the blue made it. With Mayor Green, I've been working for 2 years on trying to get two schools out there, and so she knows that. And she knows that I listen to the community. I don't make decisions from way up with a piece of paper. And then Mayor Haney, of course, the majority of the schools in the East Cooper area, all but 2, are in the town of Mount Pleasant. And so, and he knows I've worked on the rezoning for Moultrie, and I've kept his office and his council people informed, included, invited them in as stakeholders. So that also, he has faith in me as well. The second thing I noticed is, they didn't endorse the incumbent. So to me, that's a sign of that they feel change is also needed.
And let me get to accreditation. Obviously, there was some news that came down this week about it, and this is from the Moultrie News. The Charleston County School District Board of Trustees learned Monday afternoon that the district will receive its first ever system-wide accreditation from Advance, the world's most foremost education accrediting agency. When you think of Advance and the Charleston County School District, what goes through your mind?
Well, I was there for the presentation Monday, and it's an initial. It was kind of interesting because before that news was released, the presenter, the consultant that stood up, gave us the news of what was going on, and it wasn't good news from what I heard. I mean, he kind of went over a lot of problems, yet he ended. That said, we still decided to award initial accreditation. So that's good. I mean, that is good news, but he did have a long laundry list of problems. And it's sort of interesting. A lot of them were the same findings that the Clemson Diversity Study came up with too. But accredited schools, the reason, I think, when we think about private schools and they're accredited, they don't do all this crazy teaching to the test, high stakes testing, test all day long, that public schools have been doing since No Child Left Behind. And so when I think of my answer is, how do we get rid of all the high stakes testing? And I don't mean just stop taking the test. I mean, stop using those test scores to make decisions about closing schools, decisions about moving principals, decisions about firing teachers. None of those things, student test scores shouldn't be used in that way. So if our schools can be accredited, that's, to me, everyone's like, well, what about accountability? If you don't have all these tests and you don't hold people accountable with these student test scores, how else can we make sure our schools, that we're doing a good job? Well, having accredited schools is one big plus. The schools are accredited. And yes, let's look at test scores every 3 years and make sure it's going, but we need to get away from the hyper focus of just everything's data driven, everything's about student test scores.
The future of the East Cooper District, where are you emotionally with that?
The future, you mean just how kids are doing, or?
What are you afraid of? What do you want? What should happen?
In the East Cooper area? I mean, unfortunately, we did not build schools quick enough. And when when we were looking at the second high school years ago, in the community, first of all, the faculty at Wando voted, we want a second high school. The community stakeholders said that we want a second high school, and instead we got a Center for Advanced Studies over at Wando. And then there was a delay in building the second high school.
Right.
So two problems with that. One, we didn't get the second high school. Wando is 4,000 students. My daughter is there. It's too big, it's too overcrowded. And so there's a delay. We are going to get Beckham High School. It eventually will, in 2020 when it opens, we'll pull some students off. But so one, that shouldn't have, the CAS, in my opinion, should not have been built. We should have gone ahead and built the second high school then. It should have been a little bit bigger. The District 2 Constituent Board's recommendation that it served 2,000 students. And so now, and it's not, it's 1,500. And now we have the problem that I've been dealing with for the last year, is that all the Southern Mount Pleasant students that live right there are not going to fit. That means some of them may have to drive past one school to get the other. So that's one. The other one is, now that we have this Center for Advanced Studies, which once you put one in Mount Pleasant, then you have to put one in the other areas too, West Ashley and North Charleston. And so then we look at what's happening in North Charleston. There's a problem. Where's it going to go? Where's it going to go? And why? And then we have Garrett saying, why are we building a CAS? We could just add these courses, use that funding, put the CAS in Garrett, by Garrett, build that up, and instead now there's a whole community fight about where this building is going to go. And it's sort of like, do we really need CAS buildings? Or should we have worked to, every school kind of offers these things? And just, my daughter's at Wanda, so I know the Center for Advanced Studies. It's not some of the same courses. It's a building. Basically, it's a building. Some of the same courses offered in that building are offered in the main building. So really, it's extra space. Now, they do have a garden on the top for horticulture, and they have some cosmetology. There are a couple of things, but it's really not. I think everyone has the idea that this is standalone. They're offering, trades and different, courses like that, and it's some of it is, but most of it there's just an AP class and the same things in the main building. So I think that kind of hurt us by that whole idea, actually, of the Center for Advanced Studies. Of course, it's too late now. What do you do? And so we have it, and this is actually the third problem with it. Beckham is a 20-minute drive from the CAS without traffic. Okay, the idea is that we're gonna bus students from Beckham High to the Center for Advanced Studies to take courses. How much time is that gonna take out of the day? You know, an hour in transportation, you know, how is that gonna work? And there is no plan. We haven't heard a plan. Well, that plan should have been done when this was all, you know, when the Center for Advanced Studies was first, you know, when that idea came up. So there wasn't any, in my opinion, vision for that. Why are we building the CS? How is that going to work when the second high school is built? How are we going to get students back and forth? So I've just, you know, as a county board member, I'm going to have to work to smooth that out. What's the best way to bus students there, or do we need to make sure Beckham has some of those courses there? So that'll be a big challenge. But as far as all the, you know, the middle schools, the elementary schools, I mean, they're doing great. They are overcrowded. The classroom sizes are too large, and there are students still on the waiting list for reading intervention. We have students repeating grades because they never got a reading intervention the whole school year, or maybe they got it in April. So we still face, you know, some of the same problems you see in all the classrooms. Too big, not getting the, you know, the resources. It's happening in our schools here. So, I mean, in our schools over in Eastover.
To be continued. Sarah Shad Johnson, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Anytime. You're welcome.